Wyoming Territory, 1878. The wind screamed across the high plains like it was trying to peel the world apart, and still she ran. Penna Langley did not look back. Her bare feet, slick with blood and frost, pounded the frozen dirt as she stumbled down the slope behind her father's ranch house. The bruises on her ribs throbbed with every breath. Her nightgown, thin, torn, and clinging, offered no protection from the cold, but she had no time to feel any of it. Her only thought was to get away, far away. She had nothing but the will to live. No coat, no money, no belongings. But she would rather die in the icy dark than ever return to that house. The world spun, and her knees gave out. She collapsed near a narrow gulch, arms scraping through dry brush. She stayed there, curled tight, until her body stopped shaking, or perhaps until she simply could not feel herself anymore. And that was when he found her. It was near dawn when Fletcher Lorne spotted the shape in the gulch, just a lump of white and shadow against the snow. He dismounted fast, his boots crunching over the frost. At first he thought she was dead. "Miss." His voice was low, careful. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered, blue, like winter sky before a storm. "I ain't going back," she whispered, her voice cracked and dry. "You are not," Fletcher said firmly. He took off his coat and wrapped it around her shaking shoulders. "You are coming with me." She did not resist when he lifted her in his arms. She was light, too light. Her head dropped against his chest, and he felt how cold her skin was. He held her closer, shielding her from the wind as he carried her to his horse. Fletcher did not ask her name. Not yet. He just got her home. By the time the fire had warmed the cabin and she had been given water and food, she was asleep again. Fletcher sat beside the hearth, watching her, his own supper untouched. He had not planned for company. He lived alone, outside the town of Laramie, raising cattle and keeping to himself. But the moment he saw her broken and freezing in that gulch, something shifted inside him. Something he did not understand, but he did not question it. She woke near midnight. Her eyes scanned the room, wild at first, but then she saw him and the panic softened. Where am I?" "My place," Fletcher said. "You are safe." She sat up slowly, his coat still clutched around her. "I should not be here." "Why not?" "They will come looking." "Who?" Her jaw set tight. "My father, my brothers, they will drag me back." Fletcher leaned forward. "Tell me your name, Penna," he nodded. "I am Fletcher Lorne, and no one's dragging you anywhere." "Not while you are under my roof." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, like a dam broke, her shoulders crumpled and she wept, silent tears, as if she had been holding them in for years. Fletcher stood and crossed the room. He sat beside her on the cot, not touching her, just near. She leaned into him and he let her. His arm came around her, gentle, protective. She did not flinch. Over the next days she began to recover. Her bruises faded, her hands steadied. She ate more, spoke more. Fletcher gave her space but never let her feel alone. He learned what she had fled. Her father, a cattle baron with too much land and too many sons, treated her like property. Her mother had died when Penna was young, and from that day on she was expected to clean, cook, obey, and keep quiet. When she turned 18, they tried to marry her off to a man twice her age who owned land they wanted. When she refused, her oldest brother broke her ribs. That night she ran. "You were brave," Fletcher said one evening as they sat by the fire. Penna shook her head. "I was desperate." Sometimes the two looked the same. She looked over at him, eyes searching. "Why are you being kind to me?" He held her gaze. "Because I know what it is to be hurt by the people who should have protected you. And because you deserve better than what they gave you." Her lips parted, but no words came. Just a breath, soft in the space between them. By the end of the week, she was moving around the cabin on her own. She helped him feed the chickens, gathered wood, even cooked a meal. Fletcher watched her quietly as she adjusted to the rhythm of the ranch. She smiled more, laughed once, and it nearly knocked the wind out of him, but one morning she was gone. Fletcher found her tracks in the snow, leading out toward the hills. He saddled his horse fast and followed. He found her just past the edge of his land, sitting on a rock looking out over the valley. "I thought you ran again," he said as he approached. "I thought about it." He dismounted and joined her. "Why did you stop?" Penna looked down at her hands. Because I remembered the way you looked at me when I said I had nothing, like I was still someone. You are, she turned to face him. I do not know what to do, Fletcher. I have no money, no family. I'm not even sure who I am without them telling me what to be. You are Penna, he said. You are strong, you are kind, you are free now. Her throat tightened. What if I do not know how to be free? Fletcher reached out and took her hand, warm and solid against the cold. Then stay. Let me help you figure it out. She looked down at their joined hands. Why would you do that? Because I want to, because you are worth it, and because I think I'm falling for you. Her eyes filled, but this time it was not from fear. You do not even know me, he smiled, soft and steady. I know enough. Penna leaned into him, her forehead resting against his shoulder. I do not want to run any more. Then stay, he whispered, wrapping his arms around her, and she did. The sun was riding low behind the distant hills when Penna brought in the last of the eggs, her palms dusty with straw. Fletcher was mending a broken fence post near the barn, sleeves rolled, head low with the kind of quiet focus she'd come to recognize as his way. She set the basket on the porch rail and stepped down, boots crunching softly in the dry earth. They're laying more, she said. He straightened, eyes meeting hers beneath the brim of his hat. Thought they might, now the cold's easing. She hesitated. You trust me with them? Fletcher looked at her a moment, then nodded once. You take care with what's in your hands, that's more than most. Penna didn't reply. The words settled somewhere deep, somewhere still raw. She walked with him as he carried the hammer and nails back to the shed, her stride no longer cautious. The wind carried the smell of pine and old hay. It was the first time she'd gone the whole day without flinching at sudden sound. Inside the shed, he set the tools down and reached for a rag to wipe his hands. She leaned against the doorframe, watching him. You always live this quiet, he folded the rag. I aim to. You ever get lonely? He didn't answer right away. Then, I did before. She looked at the worn floorboards. And now, I reckon not so much. Penna felt the words press against her spine, steady and sure. She stepped outside again, letting the door fall shut behind her. He followed, falling into step beside her as they crossed the yard. That evening, as the light burned gold across the hills, Penna sat on the porch step, a shawl draped over her shoulders. Fletcher returned from the pasture with a slow gait, his boots caked in dry earth. He dropped his hat on the hook by the door and joined her without a word. They watched the sky change. She broke the silence. When I was little, I used to imagine places like this, far away with no shouting, no locked doors. Fletcher kept his eyes on the horizon. Didn't think places like this really existed. I didn't think people like you did. He turned toward her, one arm resting on his knee. I'm not something special, Penna. You are to me. He didn't answer. Just reached down and picked up a small twig, turning it between his fingers. She watched the motion, the way his fingers moved slow and firm, like everything he did was deliberate. I want to stay, she said suddenly. Not just because I'm afraid to leave, but because I feel like I could learn how to breathe here. Fletcher leaned back, gaze heavy but soft. Then stay. She nodded once, her hands clasped around her knees. But I won't be a burden. I can earn my keep. I can cook, so ride. I want to help. You already do. The words caught her off guard. She blinked, then looked down at her hands. I never did anything worth much before. Everything I did was expected. Here, nothing's expected. You choose what you give. Penna looked at him then. Really looked. His face lined from sun and silence, his eyes steady, not soft but not unkind. She felt something tighten in her chest, not out of fear but recognition. I want to belong somewhere, she said. Not as someone's daughter, not as someone's property, just as myself. Fletcher's thumb brushed along the edge of the twig. Then let this be that place. She breathed in, slow. The air smelled of wood smoke and dust and something faintly sweet, maybe the last of the wild sage. He didn't reach for her, didn't lean in. But his presence was a kind of touch, solid, trusting. I'd like to plant something, she said. Vegetables, maybe herbs, something that grows, he nodded. There's a patch behind the barn, soil's decent. We can turn it over tomorrow. Penna smiled, small but real. All right. They sat until the light faded and the sky turned to ink. The evening brought a chill and he rose to fetch more wood for the stove. She watched him go, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel the pull to flee when the dark came. There was no shouting, no locked doors, just the promise of tomorrow and the man who had given it back to her. Penna pressed a palm to the earth behind the barn, her fingers sinking into the loosened soil. The morning was cool and still, clouds dragging long shadows across the hills. Fletcher knelt beside her, sleeves rolled, a canvas sack of seed potatoes between them. He didn't speak much as they worked, but she didn't mind. The quiet now felt companionable, like something shared, not endured. "You ever planted before?" he asked after a while. "No," she said, brushing hair out of her face with the back of her wrist. "I watched the wives of ranch hands do it back home, but they wouldn't let me near the garden, said I'd ruin it." Fletcher grunted softly and handed her another potato. "You haven't ruined anything yet." She cut a wedge, set it in the dirt, and dusted her palms on her skirt. "Did you grow up out here, farther east?" "My folks had a small place near North Platte. Flood took it. We moved twice after that." She glanced over. "Did you ever want to go back?" "No reason to. Nothing there now." Penna nodded and returned to digging. The sun had begun to warm the backs of their necks, and the smell of tilled earth rose sharp in the air. After a while, they moved in rhythm, one cutting, the other laying in the row, each pressing soil back over the tender pieces. When they finished, she sat back on her heels and looked over the row they'd made. "You think it'll grow?" she asked. "If we keep it watered and the frost stays off, yeah, might get enough to store through winter." She smiled faintly, her fingertips tracing the edge of the row. "Feels like I did something right." "You did." They stood, brushing dirt from their hands. As they walked back toward the house, Penna slowed beside the corral. A mare stood near the fence, dark-eyed and lean, her coat the color of rusted iron. "What's her name?" "Della. She's gentle but sharp." "Don't let her fool you." Penna stepped closer, extending a hand. The mare sniffed her fingers and let her stroke the bridge of her nose. "I'd like to learn to ride," she said. Fletcher leaned against the fence, arms folded. "I can teach you." "We'll go slow." She turned toward him, squinting in the light. "You keep saying that." "Saying what?" "That we'll go slow. With the planting, with riding, with everything." He tilted his head slightly. "You've had too many things forced too fast." "Doesn't sit right with me." Penna looked away, blinking once. "No one's ever waited for me to catch up before." Fletcher didn't answer, but his gaze stayed steady on her, and she felt the weight of it like sun through fabric, warm even if not direct. Later, over supper, she stirred the beans in her bowl and asked, "Do you have any plans for the ranch?" He looked up. "What kind of plans?" "Expanding, selling, taking on hands." "Not looking to run a big outfit. I like knowing every fence I ride and every animal I raise." She nodded slowly. "I think I like that. Feels honest." He wiped his mouth with his sleeve and pushed his plate back. "You thinking of staying for the long haul?" Penna met his eyes. "I'm thinking I'd like to." He didn't smile, but something softened in his shoulders. "Then we'll plan for two." The fire crackled low between them. Outside, the wind had gone still and the night pressed close around the cabin. Penna stood and reached for the kettle, her hand brushing his as she passed. "I'll make tea." His voice came quiet behind her. "Penna." She turned. "I don't want you to feel beholden." She set the kettle down and faced him. I feel wanted, and that's different." He stood, his height casting a long shadow across the floorboards. He took a step toward her, then stopped, giving her the space to choose. She crossed it. Her fingers found his, and he held them gently, as if afraid to grip too tight. "You're not the only one learning how to be free," he said. She rested her forehead against his chest, the beat of his heart steady beneath her ear. "Then let's learn together." And in the hush of that Wyoming night, they stood without speaking, the kettle forgotten. There was nothing rushed between them, nothing forced, just two people shaped by what they'd lost, choosing what they might become. Penna rose early, before the light had settled over the ridge, and stepped outside with her shawl tight around her shoulders. A low mist clung to the ground, curling around the fence posts and the stacked woodpile like breath from the earth itself. She moved quietly, careful not to wake Fletcher, and made her way toward the lean to where she'd left the bundle of old feed sacks to mend. Inside, the scent of dry burlap and pine filled the air. She sat on an overturned crate, needle already threaded from the night before, and began stitching in small, even rows. She hadn't known she could find peace in something so plain, but the steady motion calmed her. A soft creak behind her made her turn. "You always start before the sun." Fletcher leaned against the doorway, hair tousled, shirt still unbuttoned at the collar. "It's easier when the world's still quiet," she said, not pausing her work. He stepped inside, ducking slightly beneath the low beam. "I was hoping you'd sleep longer." "I don't sleep heavy, not yet." Fletcher didn't press. He picked up a broken harness strap from the wall and examined it. "I've been thinking about that north pasture," he said after a while. "It's overgrown. If we cleared it, we might run more head through the fall." She tied off a stitch. "Is that what you want to do?" "I'd like to see the land used well. Feels wrong to let it go to seed." Penna set the sack aside and looked at him. "Then I'll help. I can clear brush same as you." He met her eyes. "You sure it's your land, Fletcher? But if I'm here, I want to shape it too." He nodded once, then moved to the door again. "I'll bring the tools after breakfast." She watched him leave, and for the first time in her life, the thought of earning her place didn't feel like survival, it felt like belonging. By midday, they'd worked deep into the pasture. Penna's arms ached from hauling scrub, her palms scraped from thorn and bark. Sweat stuck her blouse to her skin and her braid had come half undone, but she didn't stop. Fletcher worked beside her in silence, his motions practiced but never impatient. When they paused to drink, she leaned against a felled trunk, squinting toward the far ridge. "Did you ever think about leaving Wyoming?" she asked. He handed her the canteen before answering. "Once. Right after I bought the place. Thought maybe Montana'd suit better." "What changed your mind?" "Didn't want to start over again. I'd already put too much into this soil." Penna took a long drink, then wiped her mouth on her sleeve. "I've never planted roots anywhere. Always felt like I was just waiting to be sent off again." "You're not passing through anymore," he said. "You know that, don't you?" She looked at him, the weight of those words pressing into her chest. "I'm starting to." They worked until the shadows stretched long across the grass, then walked back together, boots dragging a little from the day's labor. In the cabin, she washed at the basin while Fletcher lit the lamps. The warm glow softened the lines of the room, and she caught her reflection in the window, a woman with dirt under her nails, a flush in her cheeks, and something steady beneath her ribs. He paused behind her, holding 2 chipped mugs. Chamomile. Found it stored with the old supplies. She took one, fingers brushing his. "Thank you." They sat near the hearth, legs stretched out toward the fading coals. "I was thinking," she said quietly, "about building a root cellar. If we're planting, we'll need to store things." Fletcher glanced over. "You've got the mind for it." "I think I always did, I just never had a place to use it." He didn't answer at first, then he reached for her hand, calloused and warm. "You do now. And more than that, Penna, you've got someone who wants to build it all with you." She looked down at their hands, twined together like they'd always known how. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. "I've never been anyone's choice," she said. "You're mine," he replied. "Not because you need me, but because I see you." She closed her eyes, letting that truth settle where the old pain used to live. Then she leaned in, her head resting against his shoulder, and the firelight flickered across the floor in quiet, golden waves. Outside, the wind had shifted gentler now, threading through the eaves like a lullaby. And inside, for the first time, the world hadn't just softened. It had opened. By late May, the mountains had shed their last snow and the land gave off the smell of new grass and wet clay. The potato shoots behind the barn reached skyward in neat, stubborn rows, and Penna stood barefoot in the dew-soaked garden, a kerchief over her hair, sleeves rolled as she pulled weeds from between the rows. A meadowlark called from the fence line. She answered under her breath with the same soft tune she'd heard her mother hum long ago while washing linens on Sundays. Fletcher stepped down from the porch with a ledger tucked under one arm and a folded map in the other. His boots left shallow prints in the soft dirt as he crossed to her. "I've been looking through the grazing rights papers," he said. "The old boundary line runs a mile farther west than the fence stands now." Penna rose to her feet, brushing soil from her hands. "You thinking of reclaiming it? If it's ours, we ought to, but it's a long ride out." "I'd like to show you if you're up for it." She nodded without hesitation. "Let me pack something for the ride." By mid-morning, they were riding west, the sky wide and clean above them. Della moved easily under Penna, her gait sure on the narrow ridges. Fletcher rode ahead, pausing now and again to point out creek beds or old fence posts hidden in the grass. Penna followed, steady in her saddle, her spine upright with quiet confidence. At a narrow stream, Fletcher dismounted and led his horse through the shallow water. Penna did the same, and when they reached the other side, she leaned against a cottonwood and untied the small parcel she'd packed. Wildberry hand pies wrapped in waxed linen. "I wasn't sure how long we'd be out," she said, holding one out to him. He took it, biting in with a nod of approval. "You could sell these in town and folks would line up." "I'm not baking for townsfolk," she said, watching him chew. "Only for people who have earned it." He looked at her with a quiet kind of pride. "You've changed since that first day." "So have you," she said. "You let someone in." He didn't argue. Instead, he knelt by the stream and unfolded the map. "Look here. Just past that ridge, the land flattens out. If we clear some brush, we could run another 10 head through summer, maybe more." Penna knelt beside him, her fingers tracing the faded ink. "We could build a second shelter, something small just to start. I can help saw and hammer." He turned his head slightly. "You plan to stay through next season then?" She tilted her head toward him. "I plan to stay through all of them." Neither said anything after that for a time. The stream whispered past the stones, and a hawk circled high above the ridge. They returned home in the long light of evening, the wind warm on their backs. Penna's legs ached from the ride, but she dismounted without help and began unsaddling Della before Fletcher could offer. "You planning to keep doing everything yourself?" he asked, leaning on the fence post. "I don't want to be waited on." "I know," he said, watching her, "but I want to give too, same as you." She paused, the saddle blanket in her hands. "What do you want to give?" He stepped forward, his voice low and even. "A home. A name if you want it, a promise." Penna let the blanket fall. "You asking me?" "I am." Her eyes didn't waver. "Then I'm saying yes." His hands found hers, rough palms against her calloused fingers. He didn't kiss her then, not yet. Just held her as if he'd been waiting his whole life to do so. That night, she slept with her head on his shoulder, the window open to the scent of lilac and pine, the hush of the world wrapping around them like a quilt. The wedding came 2 weeks later. Just them, the preacher from town, and a neighbor couple to witness. Penna wore a dress she'd sewn from bolt cloth she found in one of the old trunk's plain muslin, cinched at the waist with a ribbon Fletcher had bought in town without telling her. He wore his cleanest shirt and the same boots he'd worked in every day since spring. They said their vows behind the cabin, the cottonwoods rustling soft above them. No grand speeches, just quiet, honest words. Afterward, they sat on the porch with coffee and the last of the berry pies. Fletcher rested his hand on her knee. Penna leaned against his side, their bodies touching from shoulder to hip. "I never thought I'd have this," she said. "You built it," he said, "with your own hands." She didn't speak again that night. She didn't need to. Her fingers curled around his and his thumb brushed the inside of her wrist, slow and steady. Years passed. The garden grew. So did the herd. They built that second shelter out west of the ridge, just as planned. And by the third winter, Penna had drawn up plans for a second cabin, one they'd add to when the time came. Their life wasn't loud or full of visitors. They kept to themselves, mostly. But laughter filled the house come evening, and songs drifted from the porch when the chores were finished. They never slept apart again. And in the hush of every dawn, when the first light touched the hills and the chickens stirred in the yard, Penna woke beside Fletcher with peace behind her ribs and a quiet, enduring joy in her chest. She was no longer running. She was home.